French embassy in South Africa is launching a series of debates leading up to the Africa-France summit, which is set to take place in July in France. This year, the summit will break from tradition, with the focus moving from heads of states and government to civil society, entrepreneurs and the youth. But for more on this, we're joined by Cameroonian philosopher Professor Achille Mbembe and the cultural attaché at the French embassy, Selen. A very good evening to you two. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Well, we know that there will be 4 debates happening. Professor Mbembe, you've been invited to follow these and to make recommendations to the French president. What are some of these?
Are you talking about the debates?
I won't be the one making recommendations. Recommendations will be made by African actors who have been working already in 12 countries in the continent, including in South Africa. The overall goal is to reset the relations between France and the rest of the continent. And it is part of President Macron's attempt at setting anew the foundations for this relationship, moving them away from what they used to be and driving them in such a way that together we can imagine what to do in order to add a new world, common world, where each of us have a place.
Now, Selen, what will be on the agenda? We do understand that debt relief of African countries, will feature quite prominently in this debate.
I'm sorry, Achille. I'll just go ahead with that one very quickly. I think there is a variety of debates that are organized on the continent and not just in South Africa, of course. But in South Africa, we will tackle more specifically 4 issues. And the first one is cultural workers and cultural institution building. That's actually a debate that's happening on Thursday. We're going to tackle geopolitical influence and the relationship between Africa and Europe in this context. We're, of course, going to talk about historical inequalities and economic transformation. So I think it relates to your question. And the last subject that we're going to discuss about is feminisms in South Africa. And of course, the dimension that you're evoking will be very much present, but not only in South Africa, but also in Western African countries.
Now, Professor Mbembe, so much has been said about the Western countries' influence in Africa, and we're going to focus on the French influence in Africa. Where are we in terms of the relationship between France and other African states?
It's a very old relationship. I mean, it's very complex. It's a relationship of shared responsibility. That's how I can describe it. President Macron is very interested in what the younger generations are up to, what they expect, how they want to reshape this relationship, as I said, in order to move it towards more equality and more common contribution to rendering our world habitable. So that's where we are. Of course, like every old relationship, it's not always easy, but that's precisely the matter. We want to debate it. It's very encouraging of open debate. No topic is taboo. And at the end, we will chart a new road for our common future. I hope so.
Well, now, Selen, President Emmanuel Macron raised several issues with regards to, several projects. And the first was a taboo, he says, the restitution of African heritage. What does it mean by that? What is that taboo?
Well, I suppose it's taboo because it's a question that has been for a long time in a lot of intellectuals' minds and public appearances, but it has never been tackled by the state as such. And I think what President Macron did in November 2017 in his Ouagadougou speech, where he actually announced that he would like to that the conditions are gathered for the return of African art. I think it was really quite a first and coming from a French president. And after this, he asked Felwine Sarr and Bénédicte Savoy work on a report around the return of African art and in what conditions and circumstances this could be envisioned. And this was also quite a first. And what's very interesting is to see that this debate is not only happening in France now, but it's also happening beyond. And in Germany, for instance, or other countries, we can notice that this debate is actually very contemporary now.
Okay. Now, Professor, we see anti-French sentiment seemingly growing here on the continent, especially in the French-speaking countries. How would you explain that?
Look, I have been listening to people for the last 3 months. I do notice, of course, some kind of increase of anti-French sentiment, but I also notice a huge willingness to engage on the basis of new terms. And it seems to me that the dominant sentiment, in fact, is that of re-engagement. In any case, that what is passionate, that what is, I find personally extremely important to follow. Of course, our world is now terribly polarized. You will always find here and there preachers of hate, but as I'm telling you, the dominant sentiment is one of enthusiasm, one of recommitment to something new. And this is truly historical because it has not always been the case.
And we also see a French military strategy, especially in the Sahel, being severely criticized. So is a gradual withdrawal envisaged?
The situation in the Sahel and around the Chad basin is serious.
Yeah.
It is a very serious matter. The future of many African states is at stake if we are not able to contain jihadist infiltration and expansion. And by the way, in Mozambique too, we are facing the same situation. So it's a very serious matter. I don't believe in the idea of immediate withdrawal. We have to become a bit more sophisticated in terms of how we intervene, how we manage conflicts, how we prevent them, how we invest, not in strongmen, because strongmen do not really produce stability. We have to invest massively in institutions. Those are the discussions we're having with France, and the response is interesting.
Okay. Now, Selen, what's your reflection on this matter with regards to a possible withdrawal of the French from those countries? Because we've seen, there's a growing anti-French sentiment, and and especially the French military strategy in the Sahel being severely criticized. What's your thoughts on this?
I have nothing much to add to Achille. I think what he said was actually very, very complete. And I think it's not just about the military intervention. It's also about institution building in those countries, about development. And there's a lot more at stake, actually. So there's nothing much I can say here.
Well, the late President Idriss Déby did say that, it's normal for France to repay in the Sahel what it broke in Libya, Professor Mbembe, which led to the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Your reflections?
Yes, look, President Macron in particular has inherited a situation he didn't create, and yet he has to manage it. He has been trying to manage it the best he can. If Africa was able to protect itself through its own force, of course that would be easier for everybody. The fact is that if now you withdraw French troops from all those countries, I don't know who will hold the guard. All those states will definitely be in trouble. So the point is to be intelligent, to understand that most of these conflicts are multi-level, so intervention cannot be only military. It has to be polyvalent. We have to build institutions. We have to engage in development, the provision of basic services. We have to manage conflicts in a way that allows us to diminish levels of violence, which allows us also to demilitarize the political and give premium to conciliation and compromise and democratization. So those are the issues that are on the table. And as I said, they are being debated without any taboo. And hopefully we will come to a common agreement on where to go from here.
All right, Selena, just before you let go, Selena, give us more details about this upcoming summit.
Thank you very much. Well, the summit, the Africa-France Summit, it's actually it's not a new format. The Africa-France Summit is something that exists for about more than 2 decades. And as you said earlier, it's what is very new in this year's summit is that civil society will be really at the core of it. And I think that's actually an extremely important point because President Macron has always been very committed to support this civil society diplomacy in a way. So the idea is really to connect civil societies from each African countries and also civil societies from France. So yeah, that's what I can tell you about this general framework. What I can tell you is that, of course, we're very honored and very lucky to have Achille on board to be following these cycles of debates that are going to take place in the coming 2 months and be able to bring to the summit and to President Macron all the proposals and suggestions that will be made in this time. So that's very innovative, and I think another element that's important is the continental approach of Africa. I think we haven't really discussed about it today, but I think that's something very key in President Macron's foreign policy. He really wants to speak with each African country as equal partners and not just French-speaking Africa. And that's really something that's very, very obvious in what he's been doing since his mandate began. I think in 2019, he went to Kenya. He was the first French president to have been to Kenya in 70 years. And I think this also says something about his intentions and his views. So I think the continental dimension is absolutely key. That's also why we have this debate cycle in South Africa.
All right, Selena Deva, great chatting to you. Thank you so much.
You will come to South Africa too. Thank you.
Indeed. Great chatting to you too. Thank you. That was a Cameroonian philosopher, Professor Achille Mbembe, and cultural attaché at the French Embassy, Selen, on the dialogue ahead of the Africa-France Summit.